Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and I've been having an absolute blast on my Fury Warrior, and in today's video, I'm going to be covering what I've been doing to have success. I am in full honor gear. You don't need to put any time to start really pushing on the ladder, so if you're aiming for that early 1800 elite transmog, then the information in this video is going to be great for you to start climbing the ladder. This is a specialization that I think is really underestimated, but has a lot of potential. So the main thing with Fury Warrior is that you want to be maintaining uptime as much as humanly possible. That is how you are going to create pressure. You're going to use Shockwave and Stormbolt to disrupt enemy cooldowns. So here I've got uptime by running on my mount to my target, and I've stunned the Warlock on their power infusion, immediately popping Dragon's Rage and popping Recklessness into Odin's Fury, stacking up to 12 stacks of our Mortal Wounds effects to really keep the pressure going onto the Warlock. We can get a double Shockwave on the Shaman's Ascendance, and we move to Fear the Shaman's Ascendance. Now, something that the Shaman has done here is they pre-tremored, so paying attention to that. Enhanced Shaman's playing this Doom Winds one-shot build. You're going to want to kill that Tremor Totem before you fear them, but it's really good to use a stun to bait a trinket and then fear a cooldown to prevent a lot of damage. Just make sure you kill the Tremor Totem first. Here, our allies got a fear onto the Priest, so we've just maintaining uptime on the Warlock, using our stun onto the Warlock while our partner is CCing the healer. And as the Warlock here has used Demonic Gateway, we just attack the next closest target. I don't want to leave this barrier of my Priest. Pay attention to defensives of your healer. A lot of warriors out there don't. I stayed in that barrier and just attacked whoever was nearby. Barrier's over. Now I'm going to charge over to the Warlock, get another double Shockwave stacked up on all of the pets. A good idea to stack up like all these little Ghost Wolves of an Enhancement Shaman or an Infernal of a Warlock. Stunning all these extra pets does actually limit quite a lot of damage. And now in this position, we're still chasing down the Warlock. Our healer isn't CC'd. We're charging forward. We're waiting for Diminishing Return, and then we're going to stun this Warlock basically off Diminishing Return. Stunning a Warlock after they've used their Soulburn Portal is really good because they're immune to snares. So it's going to be hard to catch up to them. So saving a stun for after that moment, you can really get a lot more uptime as a result. And we're still just hammering down on the Warlock during the Sharpened Blade. There's a life grip out from the Priest. We're charging forward, continuing to maintain as much uptime, popping our Dragon's Roar and our Recklessness here basically on cooldown. We want to just be min-maxing our damage. You can see right now I'm top of the leaderboard. Another double Shockwave, just maximizing the Diminishing Return and really playing into our efficiency. We had Fear coming off cooldown. I really like using my Fear into burst classes defensively. So Enhancement Shaman I would classify as a burst class. Whenever you're healers crowd controlled, it's a good idea to fear defensively, or whenever opponents have activated damage increasing cooldowns, it's a good idea to use your fear. I generally like using my enraged regen really early. We didn't talk about it in that round, but if you're getting focused, I think using enraged regen early, especially if you're in a stun, is a good way to mitigate damage, slow down the pace for your healer. Now we've got a lobby here where we've got the Warlock on our team, so we're going to have to protect our Warlock and still maintain uptime. So charging forward and getting a Piercing Howl onto both of them would have been a much better start than this. They're actually going to get a lot of uptime. I want to snipe off this War Banner so I can get crowd control onto the Shaman's cooldowns as soon as possible. Shaman here has used Ancestral Guidance. We get an Infernal Stun. The Shaman trinkets this. So using my stun and fear here would be good. And again, we get a fear onto the Shaman. Then we should stun the cooldowns as soon as possible. A bit surprised that I didn't stun him immediately here. I waited quite a long time. He ends up burrowing beneath the ground, so we're just going to swap to the next closest target. But definitely you want to take control of the opener a lot more than that. I used Intervene onto my Warlock during that time as well. We get a double Shockwave now. We forced Astral Shift. We forced a Die by the Sword. So against the melee cleave, I like double Shockwave the DPS and then Stormbolt the healer. So you get crowd control on the DPS, holding them in place for your Warlock, and you stop healing from the healer at the same time. So that's going to kind of be our main plan here. Line up our double Shockwave and line up our Stormbolt onto the healer. We're charging over onto the Shaman, keeping up our hamstring, trying to make sure that we can limit the uptime of the Shaman or the Warrior as much as possible here. We get disarmed. We're going to trinket out of it. We're going to pummel Lightning Lasso, stop the crowd control as much as possible, go for a Stormbolt onto the healer, chase the Shaman behind the pillar, and we force Pain Suppression. Don't stay behind the pillar for too long. It's a big mistake Fury Warriors make. Don't stay around that corner. I'm not going to kill this guy through Pain Suppression. Come back in a line of sight of your healer as soon as you force that cooldown. And you know that the kill is going to be lost because you're not going to solo someone through Pain Suppression as Fury Warrior. It's just not going to happen. We charge forward towards the Warrior because the Shaman is already kited pretty far away. And you can see Piercing Howl is really stopping the Shaman from getting back to the target. So utilizing that Piercing Howl when your partner gets distance is going to be really important. Snipe off War Banner, get another double Shockwave, preventing a lot of damage here, go for an Odin's Fury, ramp up, maximum 12 stacks. We get caught into a fear, and I made a mistake here. I used Berserker Rage on the Sunder of the Shaman. If there's fear available on the team, do not use Berserker Rage on Sunder. If there isn't fear, you certainly can, but there is fear, so you shouldn't do that. Now, the Shaman just used Doom Winds. We've got him on diminishing returns, so we could fear here, but our Warlock has kited away with Portal, getting a nice double coil here, and we survived it pretty easily. Now, we're disarmed, so honestly, when you're disarmed, I don't do it here, but going into D stance, if you're the only one taking damage, isn't a bad idea. You're just going to mitigate some damage while you can't really do anything otherwise, something that I would like to improve at this moment. Now, our Warlock's getting low, so we're going to fear the Shaman. That baits him to Trinket. We get a Shadow Fury. Could go for a DR Shockwave. I end up going for a DR Shockwave just because of how scary this moment is, and we used Rallying Cry while our Warlock was low. Now we're going to Dragon's Rage. We're going to go into Odin's Fury mode and get that bleed up, get massive stacked damage going onto the Warrior. We got a fear onto the Priest. We're in a great position to really start going for a kill, and we just dunk him down with some executes and a nice fear onto the Priest in the final moments of that game. So again, if you're disarmed going into D stance, trinketing disarms is generally going to be a good idea because you want to make sure you're maintaining your uptime of your mortal wounds effect as much as possible, and then intervening whenever your Warlock is getting low to deny the big hits that are going to finish them off, and making sure that you use your Enrage Regen or your Victory Rush once you've intervened and redirected a lot of damage to yourself, so your healer isn't just suddenly panicking because you're low from all the redirected intervene pressure, is going to be a good way to survive. Now we've got another melee cleave, so our goal again is going to be attack the Warlock. Don't overextend too much. If you can't get to them, always hit the next closest thing while moving towards the Warlock. And this is a mistake that I see amongst a lot of melee DPS players at lower ranks, is that they just tunnel one target without ever detargeting it or switching for a moment, even though they can't hit it. We're going to kill Warbanner here. We're getting stacks up onto the Warrior. We can Berserker Rage a Warrior Fear, but we want to be onto the Warlock. I see Power Infusion on the Warlock. We get disarmed, so I'm going to go for a double Shockwave while I'm disarmed. Just deny some damage with this Power Infusion, and we're going to Stormbolt the Priest. Double Shockwave, Stormbolt Healer, really good combo for crowd control to kind of stagger their opener, and then we're going to work towards getting some stacks. I'm holding on to my cooldowns for a moment because he's got that Dark packed up. He actually ends up gaining away from my cooldowns, so we're just going to swap right to the Warrior as soon as possible. We get caught into a fear here. We could Trinket this. There's no disarm that would punish us, no stun really, but there's a barrier down and this is absorbing quite a lot of damage. But if I had trinketed that, I would have kept my 12 stack on the Warlock here and maybe even been able to just close out the game in that one moment. We get a nice fear here onto the Priest as the Warlock is stacked up close by. Here I'm using fear offensively because the target we're attacking is the only DPS that I can fear, and it's just going to break, and I can't really fear a Warrior, so I'm using my fear offensively in this instance. We get a Hex, we get a 12 stack. I can use the Shockwave here, get a double on the Warrior and the Warlock, always trying to maximize the value of Shockwave. Really love that that spell has come back. It's added a lot more to Fury. Fury doesn't have the most depth of any class, but it's definitely added a lot more to it than it previously had. We're going to pummel Incinerate here and intervene over to the Shaman. That stops the Warlock damage and redirects some of the Warrior damage, so we can stagger the pressure onto our Shaman and allow our healer to get some heals out. Get a nice shear here onto the Warlock. We're going to get a little bit closer. We got pummel coming off cooldown. Still a bit worried here as we see our Priest struggling to heal through Warbringer on our Shaman. We got Rallying Cry. That's our last button we can use really. As soon as I see someone get low, I look for Intervene. I look for Shockwave, Stormbolt, or Fear, and I'm going to use those to try and slow down the damage. I see a Warbanner down. We want to snipe Warbanners, Observers, Siphons, kill those things off because your healer is really going to love you if you do. It's going to be super important. And now our healer is feared, so I see the Shaman is running away, so I use Piercing Howl. This is snaring the Warrior heavily, snaring the Warlock heavily, and they're not able to get back to my Shaman in that moment where it was looking pretty scary for him. Now I'm coiled behind the pillar. I'm out on the last side of my team, trying to make my way back to my Priest while attacking the Warrior. We get a Hex on the Warlock that I don't want to break. We charge back to the Warlock. Here we're disarmed again. Could go D-stance. While disarmed, kill off the Observer. You want to just be sniping those pets whenever they're summoned in, whenever possible. And here we can go for a Stormbolt. Warrior ends up Blade Storming it. That's pretty bad. That's going to put us quite behind having our stun immuned. We intervene to the Shaman here to redirect damage during Avatar, trying to buy a couple seconds. Charge towards the Warlock and Shockwave him while our Shaman is really low. And then we're just going to go for a Dragon's Rage. We're just going to go for Recklessness on our own. Try and go for a solo kill and keep our 12 stack and keep pressure until our Shaman can get back to the target because dampening is at 54%. We basically have to win this game. We got like no cooldowns left. I go for a fear onto the healer, just trying my best to maintain as much uptime as possible to close out the game. Go for a Stormbolt out of the fear on the healer, and we're able to close out the game with that crowd control. Now do note my Warrior is still pretty green, still pretty fresh. It's wearing full honor gear basically. I think I might have one epic piece, like an epic neck piece. So the potential of this class is going to be way higher than what you're really seeing in this video. I think that it's a really gnarly class. Some of the main frustrations is playing with Mortal Wounds effect classes, because your Mortal Wounds effect gets nullified by other ones. So if you can tell them to unspec out of it, like a rogue to take off wound poison, demon hunter to unspec out of their Mortal Wounds, this is kind of like an extra little tip that I would recommend, because your Mortal Wounds is way better than theirs, but theirs will take over yours, because yours starts at like 12% and there's a 25, but yours goes up way above 25. So you want to try and make sure that if you can get your ally to spec out of your MS effect, that they do. Here we got another lobby of trying to protect our priest away. We see the priest in a fear, so we're going to charge to the warrior and stun him. This is stopping him from getting to his target, really put a lot of pressure on him. He had to trinket and die by the sword. And then we're going to charge over to the shaman, shockwave the lightning lasso. Could also have pummeled it here, but I like having shockwave and stormbolt reasonably close to each other in terms of timing for cooldown. Snipe off some of the totems, so you get a fear onto the shaman. I don't want to break that. Kill off the tremor totem this time around so that I can get a fear onto the shaman. This is controlling his doom winds, so we've improved throughout this lobby alone with that tactic. Now the shaman's got an ascendance up. This is going to be a lot of damage. We need to use probably a rallying cry. We use piercing howl on the warrior. We get them all snared and we stun the shaman. This is keeping him under control, and we're going for a dragon rage recklessness on that stormbolt while he's held in place. Trinket out of the disarm so we can keep up our uptime here, because we got our 12 stack. This is the most important time to actually make sure that we're hitting our target at this point. And Fury Warrior is a class that you're probably going to trinket offensively more often than not. It's all just about keeping your pressure going. And look at that. I got life swap. I think I got paints up. I got astral shift with that big push. And the main reason you can get away with trinketing offensively is that you have enraged regen to survive. You get swapped to. We leap back to the warrior and shockwave him. Again, don't overextend and chase anybody. You want to stay close to your warlock. Make sure that you're protecting him from whoever is on him. If the other guy's running away, then the guy that's overextended is now exposed. We get a coil. I can stormbolt out a coil, charge, reconnect, and then really just start laying in a ton of damage. I'll have my talent build linked in the description below as well if you'd like that information. We kill off the static field totem, charge forward. Just going to keep going through pain suppression as we're at a 12 stack right now, and that's going to be reducing healing quite a lot, but we don't want to overextend, so we intervene back to the warlock, redirecting a bit of damage from the warrior. This ends up getting us disarmed. We're just going to punch the war banner. The shaman is really far out of the game, so basically this is 3v1 on the warrior, which is more favorable to us rather than me chasing the shaman behind a pillar. And this is what I mean, but don't tunnel a target. If the positioning becomes bad, don't overextend. Kind of just hit the closest thing that you can and maximize your damage where applicable. We go for a stormbolt here. It's a bit reckless. I'm behind the pillar here by myself with the shaman and the priest, and he goes for a doom wind. So I clutch out a fear immediately on his doom winds to deny a lot of that damage, and we get a coil out of that. And then I can get a DR shockwave if I want to. I go for a shockwave on the die by the sword so he can't parry my attacks, and I'm just going to kite away from the doom winds of the enhancement shaman. Really important to avoid that. You're going to see a lot of enhancement shaman, and you don't want to be walking into that. We can go for a dragon's rage here. The warrior just used die by the sword, so I wanted to go for a dragon's roar onto the warrior and get some pressure. I end up getting disarmed, no trinket unfortunately, to be able to get out of this one, but we've really got them on the back foot, so I do decide to charge behind the pillar here this time. I get storm bolted, I get lightning totem behind the pillar, but looks like we're doing fine in terms of health, and I see my priest is pushing up with me. So now this is where we can start kind of like slowly pushing them all together. Once they've all retreated and they've all stacked, it starts becoming okay for your team to push together as a unit. But when one player is isolated and baiting you, you don't really want to fall for that bait. Here I get pain suppression. I'm going to run away for a second out of the line side of the warrior. And the main reason for this is I see Warbringer on myself. It's a big damage amplification from the warrior. I'm going to pummel lightning lasso, stay back a bit, and then charge forward for the kill once I'm safe and that Warbreaker is over. We can Berserker Rage out of the fear. Enemy warrior uses Rallying Cry, but they're pretty much dead at that point. I got Stormbolt Shockwave coming up, and their priest is out of mana. So we basically just choked them out with a slow and steady strategy. So you can see Warrior, it's kind of simple, but it's clean and it's fun. I really have a good time with it. I hope that this video has helped you figure out some things to try and do with your Fury Warrior and start to see more success yourself. Other than that, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the subscribe button, comment down below with your thoughts. What else would you like to see from me here on the channel? And thank you for watching the video.